I'm also very happy to see many of my near and dear in the audience. There are faculty and students from the Indian Institute of Science, and there are many people here seated in the front bench who are very well known to me. So again, I would consider this as an excellent opportunity for speaking here. Today's topic is on game theory and computer science, and some sense, today's talk will be a tribute to a celebrated personality who may be well known to many of you. This is John von Neumann. Now, he is an outstanding scientist of many dimensions, and his contributions are manifold. It turns out that in the 1920s and 30s, he was working at the Center for Advanced Study at Princeton University. And then he continued his study at the Center for Advanced Study for about 20-25 years. And during these 20-25 years, the kind of things that he did are extraordinary. He created many intellectual currents. And two of the intellectual currents that he created during this time are game theory and computer science. He was working with a celebrated economist by name Oscar Morgenstern, and von Neumann and Morgenstern together worked for about 16 years on the so-called game theory, and they came up with all the fundamental principles underlying game theory during that 16-year period. At the end of the 16-year collaboration, they came up with a 1,000-page book. It is called The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior, and though the book was released in 1944, to this day, this book continues to be an authentic source of information on game theory. So a book that was written in 1944 continues to be an excellent reference book even today. At the same time, during the 1930s, he also pioneered the concept of a digital computer. All of us talk about computer science these days, and the notion of a digital computer, the so-called von Neumann model of computing, and also the notion of an algorithm, the notion of the complexity of an algorithm, all of them actually were founded by von Neumann during the 1930s. In other words, during this 16-17-year period, he was founding a new scientific discipline which later became the science of economics, which is called the game theory. At the same time, he also founded computer science. And astonishingly, almost 80 years after he was working on these two topics, there is a big convergence of game theory and computer science today. And it turns out that the confluence of game theory and computer science today has led to many powerful applications. So in some sense, this talk is going to talk about the contributions of von Neumann to computer science and also game theory. Now, my talk will essentially hover around 5 topics. I will first talk about what are called markets with money, and then I will talk about what are called markets without money. Most of you will be wondering, what is a market without money? I'm going to give some examples of markets without money. And then I will talk about what is called game theory, which is essentially analysis of games. Then I will talk about what is called mechanism design, which is basically design of games. And then finally I will talk about this marriage of game theory and computer science, which is leading to many breathtaking and breakthrough applications in the contemporary scenario. This is going to be the outline of my talk. And the talk itself is based on a book on game theory and mechanism design that is going to be out in the market by next month. So this is going to be from the IISc Press and the World Scientific, and this is a book that I have been able to put together in the last 4 years. I teach a course on game theory in the institute, and this book basically has come out of the lectures that I have given on game theory at the Indian Institute of Science. Okay, so let me start with some examples. First I'll give you some examples of markets with money, and then I'll give you examples of markets without money. Now, the first example I would like to give is a very familiar market This is called the IPL auction. Now, this is a market with not just money, it's a market with a huge amount of money. All of you know about IPL, and you have all of these IPL franchisees, and they would place their bids on some of these well-known players in the world, and the kind of sums that they are going to pay, that they're actually paying, is to the tune of $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, and so on. So there's a lot of money involved. So now they have to have a strategy of how much to bid for a given player. It turns out that there is a science behind how much to bid for a given player, and the science behind this bidding is actually game theory. And there's a game theory researcher, Aruna Vasen, and also Debashish Mishra, working at the Indian Statistical Institute. So these are two game theorists who are actually designing bidding strategies for some of the IPL franchisees right now. In other words, behind the scenes in the IPL, it turns out that the bidding strategies of the franchisees are basically worked out using some principles of game theory. Okay, so the next example I would like to give is this example of this famous Chorus auction that happened in 2007. Now, all of you recognize the personality here. Who is this personality here? All of you know about Ratan Tata. He also happens to be the chairman of the course of the Indian Institute of Science. Now, Tata Steel is one major company, and then there is a Brazilian company called CSN, which is also a leading steel company. Both of them were actually bidding for another company called Chorus. And it turns out that there was an auction that happened on 31st of January 2007, where these two companies were vying with each other, and they were placing bids on this company called Chorus. And finally, it was actually won by Tata Steel by paying US dollars 12 billion, which is a huge amount of money. But then this happened over a 24-hour period. There were actually 17 rounds of auction, and in each round of auction, CSN and Tata Steel would actually increase their bids. So they started with a bid of $7 billion, and they were increasing their bids. Turns out that Ratan Tata was awake throughout the night that day, and he was working out strategies for what the next bid should be. And it turns out that he actually used some game theoretic principles to come out with the next bids to be placed on acquiring this particular company. So this is game theory which has been used in practice by some of these leading personalities. Now, the next example is that of a sponsored search auction, and many of you would be familiar with this application. So what is this application? So what I'm showing here is a search engine, and in this particular case I'm showing a Google search engine, and in this Google search engine, which all of you would have used, now if you type in a keyword, for example a keyword like camera or Christmas or something like that is typed in here, you will find that on the left side you will get a large number of organic links which are related to this particular keyword. Whereas on the right side you will get what are called the sponsored slots. These slots actually correspond to big companies or advertisers who would like to be shown on this right stack corresponding to a particular keyword. For example, if you type in a keyword called camera, all the camera companies, all the leading camera companies, their advertisements will be shown on the right side. Now, why do they show their advertisements? It turns out that when they show their advertisements, a user may click on those sponsored links. And when a user clicks on the sponsored link, it will happen that this particular company, for example, if the user clicks on this particular company, this company will pay a certain amount of money to Google, and Google will make a revenue out of it. And it turns out that 70% of the revenue that Google makes is because of auctions which are occurring here. Not many of us may actually know. It turns out that at any point of time, millions of keywords are being shown using the Google pages, and then millions of users are actually clicking, and then millions of dollars are going to the kitty of Google, and Google makes 70% of its revenue through what is called, so this particular process is called a sponsored search auction. So what actually happens is that corresponding to every keyword, there is a set of advertisers who will actually place some bid. They will say each time a user clicks on my advertisement, I will pay you 5 cents of money. So this kind of bids will be placed by the advertisers, and depending on the bids that are placed, Google will decide which advertiser will come to the first place, which advertiser will come to the second place, which advertiser will come to the third place. The one who has clicked, so if a user clicks on this, the amount of money that will go to Google, right, will be greater than the money that will go to Google if a user clicks on the second slot and so on. So the order in which the advertisers are also displayed generates different amounts of revenue to Google. Now, who designs this auction? Now, Google will have to design this auction in a way that their revenue is maximized. And it turns out that game theory is the science behind Google designing this auction. So most of the auctions that I have talked about, the IPL auction, right, or the Spectrum auction, or the sponsored search auction that I am talking about here, they are all designed based on scientific principles, right, which are all founded in game theory. So that's why game theory has become extremely important in the internet era. Now, my next example talks about another kind of a market. We are talking of different kinds of markets here. Now, this is what is called as a crowdsourcing market. Now, many of you would have heard about crowdsourcing. If you want to get a particular job done, now many crowdsourcing platforms exist today, and you can post the task that you want to get done on that particular website, and then anybody in the world will be able to do their job and get paid for whatever they have done. Now it turns out that the power of crowdsourcing was actually demonstrated using a very simple experiment that was done some time ago. This was actually happened sometime in 2009. So this is what is called as the red balloon challenge. And it's a very interesting problem. Now what you see here, this map corresponds to which country? All of you know that it's United States of America, right? Now it turns out that you can see that there are actually 10 different locations here, right? So there is this agency called DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Now they announced that on a particular day, on a designated day, now 10 red balloons, these are weather balloons, will be launched in 10 undisclosed locations in the United States. They said in some 10 locations, 10 random locations, 10 red balloons will be launched. And they also said, whoever is able to locate all of these 10 red balloons will get a prize of $40,000. They can use any techniques. They can use any techniques, or they can use any technology. Now all that DARPA wanted was anybody who is able to do this within 24 hours, and whoever does it first will get a prize of $40,000. Right? Now it turns out that this particular challenge was accepted by about 60 teams. More than 60 teams participated, and the challenge actually was won by a team from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who were able to locate all these 10 red balloons in exactly 9 hours 52 minutes. Now, how are they able to locate these balloons in 9 hours 52 minutes? Right, has been beautifully documented. If you go to Wikipedia and do a search on red balloon challenge, you will get the details. I will only give you the salient aspects here. MIT team, they actually put together a team of core volunteers. They said they drafted about 100 volunteers. Now these 100 volunteers were geographically dispersed throughout the United States, right? And they said they wanted all these 100 core volunteers to recruit second level volunteers. So the core volunteers recruited second level volunteers. The second level volunteers recruited third level volunteers. Third level volunteers will recruit fourth level volunteers. So like this, something like 30,000 plus volunteers were recruited, right, throughout the United States of America. Now, how did this number become 30,000 plus? They had a beautiful incentive scheme, which was designed based on game theory. They said all that they did was, there is a prize money of $40,000. Now let us divide it by 10, because there are 10 red balloons. It gives you $4,000. Now what we will do is, we will say whoever locates a red balloon and informs will get $2,000. Will get how much? $2,000. Now, one person would have recruited this person, right? So they say whoever has recruited the person who located the balloon will not get $2,000 but will get $1,000. And then whoever has recruited the person who located the balloon will get $500. And whoever has recruited the person who has recruited the person who has recruited the person who has found the balloon will get $250. Now you have a beautiful geometric series. 2,000 plus 1,000 plus 500 plus 250 and so on. What is the infinite sum of this? Anybody? If you sum up this geometric series, how much do you get? If you have only finite number of terms in this geometric series, it will be strictly less than $4,000. If you have infinite number of terms in this, it will actually become equal to 4,000. So that is how this $4,000 was divided for each balloon. And because of this incentive scheme, it turns out that in the world, if you want to get something done, there must be some reward. There must be some incentive. If you don't give an incentive, your job will never get done. But then, how much of incentive should you give, is a very important question. Now, if you want scientific principles by which the right kind of incentives have to be designed, then it turns out that game theory is the science behind that. Using game theory and mechanism design, you can actually design these incentives. So this beautiful geometric incentive design was done using game theory by the MIT team. So they were actually able to locate. You can see that the country, the United States country, is about 3 times the geographical area of India. So to have located these 10 red weather balloons which were dispersed through the vast area in 9 hours 52 minutes is a real achievement, right? And they were able to do it because of game theory. They were also able to do because of modern technologies. They used the technology of social networks. They used mobile phones. They also used crowdsourcing. They also used emails. So they used all these modern technologies. They used all the tools and techniques of computer science, and they were able to achieve, they were able to accomplish this. Okay. So that's another example of a market. Now let me give you an example of a market without money, where money is not involved. See, so far we have talked about situations where money is involved. Now let's talk about situations where money is not exactly involved. Now it turns out that this is what is called as a matching market, right? So here what you are doing is you are matching, let's say, buyers with sellers, right? Now here I have written here, matching students with colleges, right? So if you have a large number of students and they have to be matched to colleges, and students have preferences over colleges and colleges have preferences over students, right? How do you do the matching in a way that everybody is kept happy? So this is a problem called the matching problem, and it turns out that the 2012 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences was awarded to Lloyd Shapley and Alvin Roth because they came up with unbeatable matching algorithms. Now another example would be you have, let's say, a large number of employees and you have a large number of companies, and you want to find the best match between the employees and the companies based on the preferences given by the employees and the preferences given by the companies. Another example could be, and this is a very important example, and they actually use a matching algorithm in the United States to match doctors with hospitals. So these are for residents. So you have in USA every year you have something like 30,000 residents. So these are young doctors. And now there are also about 3,000 government hospitals in USA. So now you have to match these 30,000 residents to 3,000 hospitals based on the preferences given by the residents and the preferences given by the hospitals. Now, if you want to satisfy the residents as well as the hospitals, it turns out that you have to use not only game theory, you have to also use computer science if you want to do that. And such programs have been running in the United States for a long, long time. And now in the Indian context also, they are trying to use such matching algorithms for matching doctors to hospitals. And one application which will be extremely relevant to the Indian context is matching agricultural farmers to consumers of the producer farmers. See, right now what is happening is, in the Indian context, you have these so-called agricultural mandis. So all the farmers will take their produce to the mandis, and the mandis actually take away something like 80% of the total revenue. So what the farmer ultimately gets is a very meager amount. Right? And at the same time, the consumers also end up paying a lot of money. So I do not know if you go to the market these days. So if you go to the market these days, you will not get anything below 50 rupees. Right? So if you want to buy, for example, a kg of, let's say, your favorite vegetable, like capsicum, right? A favorite vegetable like capsicum will cost you nothing less than 100 rupees these days, right? So why is it happening? Because you have these agricultural mandis sitting between the agricultural farmers and the consumers. So now if you have a matching algorithm which will match the farmers with the consumers directly, and this is very much possible, it turns out that using such matching algorithms, you will be able to maximize the social welfare. So this is an example of a matching market, or a market without money. There is no money involved here. You only know the preferences of the students, the preferences of the colleges, and you will try to satisfy those preferences as far as possible in order to do the matching. Now, my next example has a lot of societal significance. Now, everywhere we are talking about organ transplants and then matching of the organs right, among the patients. Now, it turns out that now in India also, now if you want to do a kidney transplant, so here is a donor, here is a recipient, but it may turn out that the kidney that is donated by donor 1 may not be compatible to recipient 1 for a wide variety of reasons. So doctors like Dr. Gupta will tell us why that is so. Now similarly, this also may not be compatible, whereas there may be compatibility between donor 1 and recipient 2 and donor 2 and recipient 1. And sometimes you will have to go through this cycle 3 times or 4 times if you want to do the best possible matching. So now if you have, let us say, thousands of kidney donors and many thousands of kidney recipients, now how do you match these people? Because there are many constraints here, and there are also preferences here. If you want to satisfy the preferences, if you want to satisfy all of these constraints, and if you want to maximize the social welfare in the system, it turns out that all of this is possible if you use game theory and computer science in the best possible way. So you can see that all the examples that we have considered so far, whether they are markets without money or markets with money, they benefit a great deal by the blending of computer science principles with the game theory principles, and that is what we would like to talk about today. Now, let me take a slight deviation here. So this talk is going to randomly go from one topic to another, right? However, you should understand that our final goal is to show that there is a beautiful marriage that is possible between game theory and computer science, and that will lead to very powerful applications. That's the final goal, right? So let's talk about game theory. Now, as I told you, because of this wonderful collaboration between von Neumann and Morgenstern, you had all the fundamental principles of game theory developed. And then we have also seen that if you want to design markets to satisfy certain properties, then game theory is the tool that we are going to use, right? Now, this is the only slide where I will have a little amount of mathematics. Now, I do not want to show too many equations here. Game theory is actually a branch of mathematics, and unless you show at least one equation, right, it does not do justice to that particular subject. But this is the only slide where I am going to show a little bit of mathematics, which is easily understood. Now, a game basically consists of, now, by the way, the game that I am talking about here has nothing to do with video games. You are familiar with many video games. The game theory that I am going to talk about has nothing to do with video games and other kinds of games that people play, right? Okay, so you have a set of players. So you have n equals 1, 2, 3 up to n. These are the players. And then you have, for each player, you have a strategy set. You can see S1 is a set of strategies for player 1, and Sn is the set of strategies for player n. So there are strategy sets. These are actions that the players can play. And then there are also what are called as utility functions or payoff functions. So if you play a particular strategy, then what is the payoff that you are going to get is described by the so-called utility functions. Now, I will explain this definition through a very simple example. Right? How many of you here are students? Right. So there are quite a few students here, and you will really understand why I am talking about this example. Right? Now, students always have a dilemma. What is the dilemma? The dilemma is whether I should go to the college or I should go to MG Road. How many of you know about MG Road? What is the expansion of MG Road? Does it have anything to do with Mahatma Gandhi? Nowadays, it doesn't have anything to do with Mahatma Gandhi. Right? But there is this dilemma that students have. Right? Should I go to the college today or should I go to MG Road? Right? So let us look at two students. Call these two students as A and B. Now these two are very good friends. Very good friends. Now what is the strategy set here? College. Here I have written movie. College or movie. For A and B, these are the strategies. Now let us say A chooses college and B chooses college. They are supposed to choose this simultaneously. A does not know what B is choosing. B does not know what A is choosing, and they are supposed to choose their strategies simultaneously. Now, if they simultaneously choose college and college, now the benefit for them is 100, 100. A will get a benefit of 100, and B will get a benefit of 100. This is not rupees, it is some payoff or some utility, the benefit, some units. Whereas, if A goes to college and B goes to a movie, the benefits are 0, 0, because they are very good friends. They are in two different places. There is no enjoyment. So let us call this benefit as 0, 0. Whereas if one of them goes to a movie and the other goes to a college, then also it is 0, 0. Whereas if both of them go to a movie, then because they are together, there is some benefit, and that benefit happens to be 10, 10. Right? Which is of course much less than 100, 100. Now, we want to know what A and B will do. We want to know what A and B will do. So now it is very easy to see that it is good for A and B to go to the college because they will get a benefit of 100, 100. Now the story does not stop with that. Game theory goes beyond this. Game theory will tell you that even movie, right, is also a good possibility for them. Right? Not only that, game theory tells you one more thing. This is what is called, it uses probability principles, and using game theory you can show that it is good for A to go to college with probability 1 by 11 and to a movie with probability 10 by 11. That is, if you are looking at 11 days, game theory tells you that it is good to go to the college exactly on one of those days, and it is good to go to the movie on 10 out of those 11 days. If both the players do this simultaneously, then it reaches what is called as a Nash equilibrium. Right? Now, I cannot get into the details of Nash equilibrium here, but game theory will tell you that that is also a possibility. So this is precisely the reason why most of the students can be found on MG Road and not on the National College campus. Right? Now, if you want to give an explanation, if you want to give a scientific explanation, it turns out that game theory can actually give you a beautiful explanation of this result. This is my first example. Now, the second example is something that we face every day. Right? So, this is what is called as the traffic game. Now, in this traffic game, what basically happens is that there is a particular source and there is a destination. You are starting here and then you are reaching here. So let's say you call B as Baswantgudi here, right? And then let us say C perhaps stands for C. What's a good place for C? C is Chamarajpet, let us say, right? So what is a good expansion for D?
Double road.
Pardon? Double road, excellent. So what is a good choice for A? Adugudi. Avini Road. Avini Road is very good. So from Avini Road I want to go to Baswantgudi, either via Chamarajpet or via double road. Which is better? Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. Fine? Now it turns out that, so now we are looking at this game here. What is the game here? There is a vehicle here. In fact, there are a number of vehicles which are starting in Avenue Road, and then all of them would like to go to B family, because everybody wants to come to National College Baswannagudi, right? So that's why you can see B is the ultimate destination. So they want to come to Baswannagudi. Now the question is that it turns out that from Chamarajpet to Baswannagudi it takes 45 minutes. Actually, it's not true, right? Sometimes it may take 45 minutes. Assume that it takes 45 minutes. Whereas the amount of time it takes from A to C, right, is let's say Avenue Road to Chamarajpet is x by 100. What is x by 100? X by 100 is x is the number of vehicles. Let's say there are 1000 vehicles. If there are 1000 vehicles, it will actually take 1000 by 100, 10 minutes. If there are 5000 vehicles, it will take 15 minutes. In other words, the amount of travel time will depend on the extent of congestion on that road. So assume that we have a situation like this, right? Okay, now I want to change the situation slightly. Okay, so now I will not look into the slide, right? But I will take you through another route. Assume that from Chamarajpet to Double Road, right, there is a flyover. And on the flyover, you can go like a rocket. It takes only zero amount of time to go from Chamarajpet to Double Road, right? Anyway, don't imagine Chamarajpet Double Road all the time here, right? Just think about A, B, C, D here, right? Otherwise, you will get some other ideas. So now what we want to do is, if we want to go from A to B, see in the previous case, this flyover was not there, C to D was not there. Whereas in this particular case, this flyover C to D is there, and then you have zero here. That is, in zero time you can zip through that flyover, and then you will be able to reach destination B. So now there are, how many routes are there? One route is from A you go to C, and then from C to B. Another route will be A to D, and then D to B. Another route will be A to C, C to D, and D to B. There are three possible routes, right? So now, if you want to find out, right, which is the best route to take here, right, it turns out that all the vehicles will now go from A to C to D to B. They will take the flyover. So one of the reasons for this is that the human tendency is to go by a flyover, because the impression is that the flyover can be negotiated in almost no time, right? But by putting in the utilities and the numbers here properly, and by modeling this example in a very scientific way, you can actually use game theory to show that by introducing this so-called flyover here, the travel time, the average travel time from A to B actually increases. Right? You can actually show that the average travel time from A to B increases, and you can show that using game theory. Again, I do not want to get into the details of that. Now, there is an example of that in the Seoul city. So, in the Seoul city, what happened was that there was this flyover, and it was a high-speed flyover, and it was actually leading to a lot of congestion, because every vehicle would try to use that flyover. What they did was, one fine day, somebody got a very bright idea, and then they demolished that flyover and converted that into a beautiful garden. And then the congestion suddenly decreased. And from the next day, the traffic was very, very smooth. Now, if you want to explain this phenomenon in a scientific way, it turns out that you can use game theory, and you can use the notion of the so-called Nash equilibrium to show that the congestion will actually reduce if you eliminate this flyover that you have here, right? So these are two examples that I have given to show game theory. Now, one of the important landmarks in game theory is this beautiful theorem that was proved by John Nash. Now, I do not know how many of you here have watched this movie called Beautiful Mind, right? How many of you? So, though many of you have watched this movie, turns out that, so the hero of that movie in real life is John Nash, who is still alive. He got the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 1994, and he showed that every game of the type that we have studied so far has a Nash equilibrium. And Nash equilibrium is the equilibrium state, or is the state that all the players in a game will converge to. That is, the players will play their strategies or their actions in such a way that all of them will end up in a Nash equilibrium. Right? Unfortunately, I cannot get into the details of that, but it is enough to remember that when you are playing a game of the type that I just now described, now Nash equilibrium is a natural outcome of such a game. Now, I will now describe what is called as mechanism design. So now I have told you something about game theory. Now, this next thing I am going to tell you is about mechanism design. Now, game theory is all about, if you are given a game, what is the equilibrium? How do you analyze a game? Whereas, what is mechanism design? Mechanism design is, I want to design a game. I want to design a game so that I will get something desirable out of this game. Now, I will give you an example here. So, let's not worry about this. Here is an example. Now, here what we are going to do is we are not going to analyze a game. We are actually going to design a game. Now, the problem is very simple. This is the famous cake cutting problem, right? So, this is supposed to be a cake. Does it look like a cake? Yes. I hope it looks like a cake, right? Now, there are these two kids, kid 1 and kid 2, right? And here mother. So, we call the mother as mechanism designer or game designer. Or we will also call her as social planner. She is the one who does the social planning for the family. Now, what's the problem here? There's a cake and it has to be divided equally between these two kids. Very simple problem. Now, what does every mother do? Every mother will take the best possible knife, and then try to cut the cake exactly into two pieces. And then the mother will give one piece to kid 1 and the other piece to kid 2. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is every kid will feel that he or she got the smaller of the two slices. Every kid will feel that it got the smaller of the two kids. Now, this is the usual problem. Now, let us solve this problem using game theory or using what is called mechanism design. Now, in this mechanism design, the mother, who is the social planner, comes up with this following protocol. She comes up with a mechanism, algorithm. What is this algorithm? She says, here is a knife. She tells kid 1, you take this knife and you cut it into exactly two slices. You slice it into two pieces. So kid 1 will slice it into two pieces, and then the mother will tell kid 2, you pick up one of those. You pick up one of those. Now you can see that kid 1 gets the chance to slice the cake. Kid 2 will get the chance to pick up one of those two slices. Now what will kid 1 do? What kid 1 will do is, it will think, right, this kid 2 is always going to pick up this larger of the two slices. So it will ensure that it will actually slice it exactly into two halves. So that is taken care of. Kid 1 is taken care of. Kid 1 is happy. Now, how about kid 2? Kid 2 will look at those two slices and it will pick up what she thinks is the larger of the two slices. That way, kid 2 is also happy, kid 1 is happy, and the mother is happy. Why is the mother happy? Mother is happy because both the kids are happy. Right? So, here is a nice mechanism. It's actually simple game theory has been used here. You can define the players here. There are 3 players here. You can define the strategy sets here, you can define the utility functions here, and at the end of it, you are able to come up with a solution which is satisfactory to everyone, which is actually maximizing the social welfare of the system. Now, another example, with which also you are very familiar. So, this is also a mechanism. This is also a mechanism. Now, this mechanism, here the mechanism designer happens to be this historical personality whom we know as Tenali Rama. Many of us know about Tenali Rama. And then we also, if it is South India, it is Tenali Rama. Are there any North Indians here? There are. Right? If it is North India, think that it is Birbal. Right? And then if you are from overseas, from outside India, think that it is King Solomon. Right? So because this is called King Solomon's problem. So what's the problem here? See, in the previous problem, see, by the way, The cake cutting problem, don't think it's a very frivolous problem. It is not a lightweight problem at all. Right? It's not a lightweight problem because the two kids there could be, for example, Anil Ambani and Mukesh Ambani. Right? And the cake is the huge property that they are trying to share. And who is the mechanism designer there? Their mother. In fact, their mother actually was involved in the sharing of the property of these two Ambanis. Right? So, in this problem, we now have two mothers and exactly one kid. Now, what is the mechanism here? So, the two mothers come here. The two mothers come to, let's say, Sri Krishna Deva Raya. They come to Krishna Deva Raya and they tell the king, I am the mother of this baby. So, there is one baby and I am the mother of this baby. Now, both the mothers are claiming to be mothers of the baby. Now, as usual, the king is clueless. So, whenever the king is clueless, what does the king do? He will look at his vice minister. And in this case, Tenali Rama. And Tenali Rama solves the problem. Right? Tenali Rama is one of the greatest game theorists of all time. He is also a mechanism designer par excellence. So, he comes up with this following mechanism. It looks like a cruel mechanism, but it solves the problem. The mechanism is, he tells both the mothers, let's do one thing, let's get a fork and let us slice this baby into two portions. And each of you take one of these portions. And then he looks at the body language of both the mothers. Now, by looking at the body language of both the mothers, and the real mother immediately cries and says, please do not cut the baby into two portions, you give it to the other mother. Now, using the body language and using the reaction from the two mothers, now Tenali Rama is able to say who the real mother is and who the fake mother is. So here is another example of a mechanism which is maximizing the social welfare and which is solving a so-called unsolvable problem in the view of the king. Right? So game theory and mechanism design will actually help you to solve real world problems. Now we talked about markets, we talked about economic markets, we talked about markets with money, we talked about markets without money. Now if you want to decide a market, now who are all the stakeholders in the market? Now the stakeholders are, there could be buyers, there could be sellers, there could be brokers, there could be the government, and there could be so many other stakeholders also. Now our idea is, how do I design a market, right, which is good for all the stakeholders? It should be good for the buyers, it should be good for the sellers, it should be good for all stakeholders. If you want to do that, it is very much possible. You have to only decide what are the properties to be satisfied. You want to maximize the social welfare. Now, you want to minimize the costs for the sellers. You want to maximize the profits for the sellers. So, you want to do all of these in the market. Game theory tells you that all of these can be simultaneously achieved. And it comes up with mechanisms by which you will be able to design such markets. But if such markets have to be operationalized, if such markets have to be deployed in the real world, it turns out that computer science is very, very important. Without computer science, the markets, the economic markets designed by game theory cannot be deployed, cannot be implemented. Right? Okay. Now, I will give you one last example, and this is a very famous auction called as the Vickrey auction. Now, this Vickrey auction fetched a Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences to William Vickrey in the year 1996. And in fact, it turns out that when the Nobel Prize was announced, Vickrey was alive, but he passed away before he could actually receive the Nobel Prize. Right? So this Vickrey auction is a very important auction. Now here the thing is that you have a particular item. Assume that there is a very valuable painting, or let's say there is a camera. There is a camera, and there are 4 people who are interested in this camera. Somebody is trying to auction the camera. And then what happens is, one of them values the camera at 40, another of them values at 45, and the third one values it at 60, and the fourth one values it at 80. Because different people, different individuals will have different valuations for the same item, right? Now, when the auction takes place, though my value for the camera is 80, I may not bid 80. I may bid something like 60 or 50. Now let us say I want to come up with an option. I want to come up with a mechanism. I want to come up with an algorithm. I want to come up with a protocol which will make all the stakeholders bid exactly their true valuation. If my valuation is 80 rupees, I will bid 80 rupees. William Vickrey showed that such an auction can be designed. And what was the beautiful principle that he came up with? He said, let's do the following. Now, let's say 40, 45, 60 and 80 are the bidders. I will give the camera to the person who has bid the highest amount. In this case, the highest amount is 80. Now, in a usual auction, what will happen is that if I have bid 80 and I am declared as the winner, I will end up paying 80 rupees. But in Vickrey auction, I will not pay 80 rupees, but I will pay what has been bid by the second highest bidder. Who is the second highest bidder here? 60. Right? So now I know that by bidding very high, I can be declared as the winner. But when I am the winner, I don't have to pay whatever I have bid. I have to pay only the amount that has been bid by the second highest bidder. So by changing this payment principle in a very subtle way, William Vickrey was able to show, because now everybody knows that they can bid very aggressively because they know that they are going to pay something less than what they have bid. And he showed that such an auction will be truthful. In other words, if my value is 80, my bid will be 80. If my value is 60, I am going to bid 60. I will never bid less than my valuation. And he showed, using game theory and the mechanism design, that such auctions can be designed. And it turns out that in many of the auctions which are currently being used, for example, the Google auction that we were talking about, or the Spectrum auction that we are talking about, some variations of the Vickrey auction are being employed. Okay. Well, it turns out that if you want to design such mechanisms, now you would like to identify some properties for these mechanisms. I want the mechanism to be such that everybody will report their true values. I want the mechanism to be such that there is something in it for everybody. I don't end up losing some money. Now, I want the utilities of all the players to be maximized. I don't want anybody to suffer the losses. Like that, I want the allocations to be very fair. So there is a bunch of properties that you can define for a mechanism to satisfy. Now, game theory tells you that not all these properties can be satisfied, and that is why mechanism design is a very intricate discipline. Now, the complexity of mechanism design arises because now your wish list contains a certain set of properties, but not all of these properties are satisfied. Now, you want to find out what is the maximal set of properties that can be satisfied by a given mechanism in a given context for a given application in a given domain if you want to make out. So it turns out that there are the so-called possibility and impossibility results in game theory and mechanism design which will help you to do that. Now, I'm just showing this diagram without any explanation. It will tell you that if you want increasingly different properties to be satisfied, you will see that the space, the feasible space that is available to you becomes less and less, and finally the feasible space becomes almost the empty set. Now, mechanism design is all about finding out, right, in which part of this mechanism design space your mechanism should be, so that it will satisfy the properties that you desire for that mechanism. So that's why it's an extremely interesting and extremely intricate subject, and this is the reason why game theory and mechanism design has attracted the maximum number of Nobel Prizes in economic sciences. It turns out, I'll show you some of this very soon. Okay. So it turns out that in 2005, so there are two Nobel Prizes in economic sciences that were given, Robert Aumann and Thomas Schelling. So they made path-breaking contributions in game theory. So they were the ones who actually developed the concepts of Nash equilibrium to the next level. Now it turns out that Leonid Hurwitz, Eric Maskin and Roger Myerson, so these are the three economists who received the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 2007. And all of them have worked on mechanism design. That is, how do you design mechanisms so that it will satisfy the properties that you want from the mechanism. Right? And two of these Nobel laureates have already visited the Indian Institute of Science, Robert Aumann and Eric Maskin. Both of them gave lectures in the Indian Institute of Science, Tata Auditorium, to more than 1,200 people and so on. And I'm also happy to tell you that Professor Eric Maskin actually has written a foreword to the book that I have just now written. So he actually wrote a foreword to the book on game theory and mechanical design that is going to come out next month. Now, 2012 was another year which was like a bumper year for game theory and mechanism design. Turns out that Lloyd Shapley and Alvin Roth. Lloyd Shapley, who is now 89 years, he is the oldest winner of the Nobel Prize. And Lloyd Shapley and John Nash, we talked about John Nash already. Lloyd Shapley and John Nash, they worked with the same research advisor at the Princeton University. So both of them actually worked with a person called Albert Tucker. They were students of Albert Tucker. And it turns out that John Nash was working on what is called non-cooperative game theory, while Lloyd Shapley was working on what is called cooperative game theory. And they came up with beautiful concepts in the late 40s and early 50s. And it was always a puzzle that Lloyd Shapley never got the Nobel Prize. And finally in 2012, Lloyd Shapley actually got the Nobel Prize. In fact, 1 month before October, it's usually the Nobel Prize is announced in October, November. So 1 month before October last year, so we had a session in our lab. So we have this game theory lab at IISc. And we were discussing who will get the next Nobel Prize. So one of the students, he said, sir, Shapley has not got the Nobel Prize so far. And Shapley's work we keep referring to in all our papers. And we actually use Shapley's work extensively in the research that we do. And he was saying, it would be very nice if Shapley gets the Nobel Prize this year. So this student. And then it turns out that on November 14th, when the actual Nobel Prize was announced, this boy was looking at the internet almost every minute. And the moment he knew that Lloyd Shapley has got the Nobel Prize, he sent an email to the entire Indian Institute of Science saying that Lloyd Shapley has got the Nobel Prize. And then you can see that Alvin Roth is another person who got the Nobel Prize. Now, the reason why they got the Nobel Prize, okay, I will skip this slide in the interest of time. So it turns out that one of the main reasons why they got this Nobel Prize was this National Residence Matching Program I was talking about. In other words, I was telling you that every year there are about 30,000 young doctors who graduate in USA. And there are about 3,000 hospitals located throughout USA. And now every doctor is expected to give a preference ordering of hospitals. So let's say one young doctor says, I prefer hospital A to hospital B to hospital C, hospital D. Like a doctor will give a preference vector. Now every one of these 30,000 young doctors will give their preference vectors. At the same time, depending on the specialities of these doctors, now the hospitals also will give their preference order. Now one hospital may like to have, for example, a nephrologist as the first preference, right? Or a urologist as the second preference, and so on. So hospitals also will give their preference vectors. Now the question is, how do you match the preference vectors of the young doctors with the preference vectors given by the hospitals, so that all these preferences, as far as possible, are satisfied by the solution that you come up with? Now, another very important problem is, how do you ensure that the young doctors and the hospitals will give their truthful preferences? See, for example, somebody may prefer A to B, but may report it as B to A for some extraneous strategic reasons. So how do you make the young doctors and the hospitals to give their truthful preferences is another question. Now the scale of the problem is very, very high. You are talking about 30,000 doctors and 3,000 hospitals. Now if you try to do it manually, it's impossible. Now, if you try to do it with a computer using any algorithm, now how do you know that all these preference vectors can be satisfied? Very difficult. And then how do you ensure that all of them are truthful? That's even more difficult. So it turns out that now game theory and computer science play a very important role here. Now where does game theory play a role here? Game theory now ensures that all of them, using principles of game theory, you can ensure that all of them will give the truthful preferences. Once you know the truthful preferences, if you want to come up with a matching, it has to be through an algorithm. And this algorithm is basically the contribution of computer science. So this is one beautiful application, real world application, where computer science and game theory are coming together for the social welfare. Now, a similar kind of an application has been tried out in school admissions, for example. Whether it is New York City or Boston Public School or any of these, and now even in India, right, if you want to do the school admissions, now the students may have preferences, the schools may have preferences, and then if you want to ensure that the students are happy and also the colleges are happy, right, then it turns out that game theory and computer science have to come together, right? So this is my last slide. In this last slide, this is a sort of a very congested slide. There is a lot of congestion in this slide. Now, this congestion actually will give way to some clarity. What is the clarity here? The clarity here is the following. You have these markets. We have talked about different types of markets. These are all economic markets. They may or may not involve money. And many of these markets are actually for the good of the society. For example, kidney exchange markets. They actually maximize the social welfare of the society. So I have given an example here. This is sponsored search option where Google is trying to make a lot of money out of it. Now, here is an example of a kidney exchange. So this is a mechanism without money. This is a market with money. So you have all these marketplaces. Now you want to design and operate these marketplaces for the social good. If you want to do that, now you have this game theory. Now I have given here the pictures of all of these game theories. The first in the list is Von Neumann. Now why is it first in the list? Because in our very first slide, I told you that the greatest contribution of Von Neumann was that he imagined not only game theory but also computer science almost 80 years before they came together. So you can see the astonishing kind of an imagination or genius of Von Neumann. Now you have Lloyd Shapley, you have John Nash here, you have Leonard Hurwitz here, you have Robert Aumann here, Erich Moskowitz here, Thomas Schelling here, and Roger Myerson here. So these are all game theorists who have made path-breaking contributions in game theory. They have given us all the principles of game theory using which we can actually design all of these markets in the best possible way so that they satisfy all the properties for you. Now on the other side, what we have are computer scientists. Now does anybody know what is the Nobel Prize equivalent in computer science? It's called the Turing Award. So Turing Award is like the Nobel Prize in computer science. Like for example in mathematics, the so-called field medal is equivalent to Nobel Prize. Now some of these are Turing Award winners and some of these are future Turing Award winners. Now who is this? So would anybody be able to tell me who this one is? Anybody from computer science here? I can see some young students from computer science. Okay. Anybody from BTech, MTech? Anybody have heard of Dijkstra's algorithm? Shortest path algorithm? Okay. Doesn't matter. So this is Edgar Dijkstra. Who developed, so if you have a large number of cities, and then you want to find the shortest path from one city to another city. Why should we talk about cities? We can talk about Bangalore itself, and then try to find the shortest paths. If you want to do that, Dijkstra's algorithm is the best algorithm to do that. So he got a Turing Award. And then this person had written 4 classic books in computer science called The Art of Computer Programming. So his name is Donald Knuth. and he's 85 years old and still works for 16 hours a day at Stanford University. Now, he's the father of algorithms. Now, many of you would have heard of what we call database management systems. So this is Todd, who is the father of database management. He also got a Turing Award. Now, this is Stephen Cook, who introduced the notion of what is called NP completeness and NP hardness and the computational complexity of algorithms and got a Turing Prize. This is Richard Carr, who came up with unbeatable so-called approximation algorithms. So these are all some frontier topics in computer science, all of which are involved if you want to design, if you want to implement these markets which are designed using game theory. Now, if you have 30,000 young doctors and 3,000 hospitals and you want to design an algorithm which will match them, and then you want to run this program on a desktop, even if you run this program on the desktop for 100 years, you may not get the solution for it. Now, if you want to get the solution, you have to develop a really efficient algorithm. Not only that, you have to develop a computing environment which will also do these computations very, very fast. That's where computer science comes in. Now, economists and game theorists, they actually came up with solution concepts like Nash equilibrium and so on. These are very glamorous kind of concepts. But then if you want to compute a Nash equilibrium, it should not happen that it takes years to compute a Nash equilibrium. So economists and game theorists did not worry about the practical issues involved in the solution concepts that they came up with. Now, if you want to now make these things work in practice, in real life, it turns out that computer science becomes very important. So in computer science, designing better algorithms and designing better computer architectures on which these algorithms will perform very well, become very important. And then I'm also giving here the pictures of 3 of the most exciting computer scientists currently who are working in game theory. So you will see that there are now many leading groups, whether it is Stanford University or MIT or CMU or Berkeley or Cornell or Princeton or any of these leading places or IISc. There is now a leading group which works on not only computer science but also game theory. And it turns out that this is Christos Papadimitriou. So he works in the University of California, Berkeley. And about 15 years back, he was the one who opened up game theory into computer science. He said computer science has a very important role to play in order to make game theory actually being applied in practice. So this is Christos Papadimitriou. He has in fact written a beautiful novel. You can go to his website. He has written a novel called Alan Turing. He has written a novel on the life history of Alan Turing, whose centenary birthday we celebrated last year. So this is one person who has not yet got a Turing Award, but don't be surprised if he gets the Turing Award next year. So I am making the prediction that he will get the Turing Award next year. So let's wait and see. Now here is an Indian, very young. She is just 37, 38 years old. Her name is Arpita Ghosh. She works in Princeton University. She has written some of the best papers on algorithmic game theory. Combining game theory with computer science, she has written some of the best papers. And then you have this person called David Parks. And it turns out that we have a very good interaction going on between IISc's group and David Parks' group at Harvard University. He is another person who is basically a computer scientist, but working on some very important game theory problems. And all of these people, so you can see that these are some of the most brilliant minds in computer science. And these are celebrated game theorists. When they come together through these economic markets, which may or may not involve money, now there's a beautiful marriage that happens between game theory and computer science. And this is the marriage which is actually leading to very powerful and extremely compelling applications in the internet era. We should understand that the internet and the World Wide Web have played an extremely important role in game theory and mechanism design to be used in all of these powerful applications. Right? So this is an exciting area in which you can work, and the youngsters who are here, who want to do research, or who want to do a BTech project, or who want to do an MTech project, or who want to pursue a PhD, right? One exciting subject on which you can work is algorithmic game theory, or the interface that exists between game theory and computer science. So with that, I think I have tried to give you the excitement behind these two intellectual currents or intellectual disciplines, and hope many of you, young and old, will get locked to this area and then start working in this area and start making path-breaking contributions and make India very proud in this particular area. Thank you very much.